I want to talk today about a bit from the perspective of the business of making. And in fact, I would have probably, if I'd thought about it in time, I would have changed that title to the business of making. But making connections will do. It's about the relationships that creative people are building around them in order to have try and turn their ideas, or maybe turn their thoughts into ideas, and then their ideas into reality. And I think today we're looking at environments that help people do that in new ways. And the big question for a lot of creative people, and then I think also for businesses, is what are you actually part of? And that's, again, to do with this balance. Is it a personal thing? Is it an organizational thing, a social thing, environmental thing? How do you see yourself, your invention, or your design, or your business? And that's a big question that I think for a lot of creative people, you start, like me, I guess, I studied industrial design in the late 80s. You start with kind of sanding pieces of cardboard, so very surface. You then maybe get to build something that you're told, like a cube. You try and do it really well. Then you get to think what that cube might be, and slowly you start dealing with content. Then if you're interested, you start questioning the content you were given, and you start questioning the people that gave you the content. And so that's kind of what happened to me. I got to the area that is about brief writing, brief setting, programs. And so I studied in the 80s, and I kind of tried to put this in context in terms of what were we being driven to? What were the things being talked about at that period? What happened slightly before? What were the things that were driving people? This is very, very kind of blocky, but it does give a sense of the things that I see students being drawn to, and who's responsible for pushing that way. Big companies are involved today in open design innovation, but that's not a new thing. And we are looking at different kind of, if you look at any company, there's kind of the interests of the CEO, how do they filter down to what actually happens, or who influences things? And for the creative industry, or people that work in the creative community, or makers, or this kind of territory that we are in now, I think, is a lot to do with the social agendas that are coming in for a lot of people. Maybe a closer look in terms of design itself. So what kind of designer are you? What are you part of in terms of a discipline? And we see discipline kind of split off, emerge, disappear, some of them getting stronger. But yes, you can try and analyze trends. That's one way of looking at it. The other is really following what you're interested in, and then seeing if you are really part of something or not. This evolution of different aspects of design, I don't know, I'm hoping there are others that I haven't included here, but in a way, it's very much about finding the community which you are part of. And we call them communities of practice sometimes. I think that's a relatively good term, because one of the things is that you can connect to another community. It's not really a particular type that you are need to stay in. And the connections between different kind of strands, and this is only within product design, or maybe today we should be calling it technology design. The industrial design, we stopped using that. We started using product design. I think most people that are in this territory call it technology design. But the real question, I think, and I was involved in doing a show called The Power of Making for the Victoria and Albert Museum and the Crafts Council 4 or 5 years ago. And the big question that was kind of behind this show was to ask what kind of times are we in, and what is our role? Where do you put yourself? How do you see what is going on in the world? And I'm looking at it particularly through the goggles of making, in this sense. things that have happened to making, attitudes to making, or the way making and makers are perceived are influenced by these factors. So I guess the question is, who feels that making is important to our society? Maybe I could see hands up. Quite a lot. In fact, I'd say close to 90%. Who thinks policymakers understand that? That's quite a big difference. So what are we going to do about it? This is one of the questions, and one of the roles, I think, of creative people is to be able to bridge. Because I don't think that the fact that it's not being driven by policymakers is because they don't agree. It might be that there is a kind of bridge that has to be built in order to enable the understanding of the value. Just to kind of bring home a few of the things that are happening today. So we are losing a lot of skills. The distance from production means a lot of people don't know what the things they're wearing are made of. They definitely don't think about fixing them. There's a real erosion. Now we're buying things very quickly, and sometimes we're not aware that really behind that there is abusive production. It's not going away, and some companies are doing things about it, but it's there. And possibly it's too late to change that. Or we could see what's going on now as a kind of renaissance of making and understanding of the importance. We're seeing new models of fabrication, new models of distribution, new models of business that are helping us rethink economical models. So is this the beginning of a new era, or is this the end of humanity as makers? That was the question behind Power of Making. Obviously, the answer that we were interested in was to be positively, ideologically driving towards a society that understands that making is something that almost anyone can do. I'm going to just go through a few projects through this kind of filter of how people make connections, or what are the connections that help, I guess, more the kind of younger creative businesses and the mindset of connecting, the networks, the kind of communities of practice that they are part of, through projects that I've been involved in. So one of the things that is very important, and we try to make happen as much as possible, but I think there's also a role for lots of local places and spaces that can do this, is about sharing practice. Not necessarily doing it together, but actually communities sharing the way they do things. And open design allows that, but also galleries do that, and books do that. But we need to push for, one of the things, I ran a gallery for 8 years in central London, showing prototypes of architecture, prototypes of products, a lot of process, experiments. This was one of the few places that architects actually go out of their studio to come and see other people's way of working. You work so hard that you're head down, you develop your way of working. It's so rare to see how other people work. This is one of the biggest leaps that happen in design education, is peer learning. We know that. We have to do that also professionally. So the Aram Gallery was really a place to show different disciplines together, different processes, but demystifying the whole kind of behind doors. That's becoming much more prevalent because YouTube allows us to show films. But over the last, say, 15 years, it's become, I guess, maybe more part of people's practice. But it could and should be encouraged, I think. Also, making more of shared knowledge. So the Power of Making really was about celebrating humanity's ability to make amazing things, but also making the point that no one owns the knowledge about making. No one should. Maybe for a while, for 70 years, you own something, but you're actually contributing to a much bigger picture. And it is this bigger picture that connects us as makers, whether you're a blacksmith or a medical engineer, a fashion designer or an artist. Making is a territory which we all share some very critical values. These were the kind of messages we tried to achieve through Power of Making, and which meant that the exhibition wasn't about people, it was about skills and their relationship to imagination. So the criteria for inclusion in this exhibition was imaginative use of skills. And that allowed me to really put unbelievably ingeniously well-made dry stone walling next to a MakerBot. Because the way we learn how to do things, the way we transfer knowledge is the same in both cases. You learn from someone. It's not one person that invents all the details, it's an accumulated knowledge. And so the exhibition really looked at all these ways of learning, transferring knowledge. One of the areas was an actual makerspace called Tinkerspace in the exhibition, which showed new materials, new processes, but also was very much a dynamic makerspace that spawned other makerspaces from it. And 8-year-olds and older kids tried things from casting to robotics. And the point was the mix of low-tech and high-tech, traditional and new. Not one of them is more important than the other. It is the mix of them that was critical, and the non-hierarchical understanding that this continuum of knowledge is the thing that we must celebrate and encourage. So all the program there was built on this principle. So it's about access, but really what we want to get to is confidence. Whether you're talking about kids trying a 3D printer for the first time, or you're talking about innovation process for small companies that need to believe that they can pull it off as a young business. The next level is sharing process. And when we're talking about sharing process, is actually doing things together, not talking about it, being involved in other companies' process. Matt talks a lot about open innovation. I think this is one of the most exciting and interesting things that a business can look at or be part of. That is different from open design in the sense that it's a structured way of working with brain power and knowledge outside your company. But in terms of what it does, I think one of the things that struck me when I read the Cox report was this really substantial hurdles that were described for working across business. And it is the shared process with a client that enables us to overcome these. This shared process is called the brief. Now, a lot of times the brief was considered a kind of closed thing that was given over, but I think we need to rethink that. We need to see the brief as a live thing that is the conversation between the two sides. There are so many insights on client side, and there are so many opportunities that designers can bring in at that level that I think the brief is the first and the most important way of sharing process. I've been involved in thinking about briefs and teaching them to the designers and some product managers. And we always talk about the kind of, what type of brief is it? Is it a brief that really constrains the creative response, or is it a springboard? And is it seen as a one-sided thing or a joint thing? One of the things that is very, very obvious when you look at any brief that you've been given, it's that the briefs that deal with action, or a result that is described as an action, tend to bring great results. When someone gives you just a very vague source or an ideology, you can go really lose the plot as a designer. When someone gives you a conclusion, it's locked, it's much harder to respond well. And then the conversation needs to bring it together to an area of action. And what are these actions? These are talking about behavior, talking about the technology, talking about the process. Look at the outcome, not necessarily the typology. So not locking. And I heard before people talking about a brand or changing or working with the clients. I think that's the key here. It's this conversation about changing the briefs into this direction. And one of the things that we've recently done in order to share processes, it's a project commissioned by the British Council of connecting young makers in South Africa and makers, creative people in the UK. We've set up a network of small makerspaces. What's unique about these makerspaces is that They're technological, but they're also cultural. They include a library and a gallery as part of their kind of formula. They're scalable, so someone can set up a shelf with the library that's with our reading list or the books that they get, a sewing machine and one plinth, or you can run a fully fledged gallery with a big communal library and a makerspace. And that's happened in Cape Town, and it's happening in Glasgow, and we're now up to 9. And we're looking for people to join this. It's a way of sharing process, but also of mentoring. If you visit here, I'm not going to talk in detail, but it's an invitation to share process and also to start sharing products. This is the network as it is now. We're hoping it will grow a bit. But some of them put up their programs to share with others. Some have local events. Sometimes there are network-wide events. But these kind of connections encourage peer learning. They offer mentoring, shared knowledge. They're all based on open design. This is a maker library in Cape Town. This is a top view of another one. This is one in Edinburgh. They took the same parameters and they're traveling to different fabricators, to 2 architects that are interested in experimental use of traditional techniques. So they take their library and they travel places